Hello, everyone. My name is Priscilla Chataika with Financial Poise, and I'll be your moderator for today. Our panelists for today are J. Eduardo Campos of Embedded Knowledge, Inc. Eduardo, would you like to give a brief intro about yourself?
Thank you. Yes, I've been working with cybersecurity in large corporations for over 25 years, and I've been both sides of the counter as a consultant and as a corporate security director in manufacturing, in telecom, and in large tech. I'm still learning today, and it's a lifelong learning in cybersecurity. It was the internet, it was local area networks, internet, cloud computing, now AI. We are all in a journey to learn, and we are here to share our successes and our failures and some best practices.
Thank you. And we also have Alex Sharp of Sharp LLC.
Hello.
Alex, would you like to give an intro about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Priscilla. So Alex Sharp, it's sharp like a knife. Feel free to reach out over LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. Like Eduardo, I'm also a practitioner. Been in this for over 3 decades. Pretty much been on every side of the fence. I've been a CIO, I've been a CISO, I've been the business owner, been a consultant, so pretty much work around all the various aspects. As you move up the chain, a lot of what you end up doing is more around strategy, managing the business relationship, and then compliance regulations and the like. Most of my work these days is actually advising boards and senior leadership on moving into a resilience strategy and also the governance of AI.
Thanks, Alex. And for our panelists' complete bios, please refer to slides 57 to 59. And before we get started, just a quick disclaimer. The materials in this webinar are for informational purposes only. It should not be considered legal, financial, or other professional advice. We've also provided a summary description of the webinar and series on slides 7 and 8. You may also want to take a look at our other episodes in this series, episodes 1 and 2. Before we get started into the deep knowledge of implementing information security programs, Alex, would you please explain to us what information security is?
Sure. It's one of those terms that keeps evolving. When I started my career, the argument was, do we do network security or computer security? And then are those two combined together? And now it's information security. The term we now hear is cyber. Not exactly sure how we moved to that, but it's the popular term. And what it really is protecting digital assets. Now, you can argue, and some do, that it's protecting data or information in whatever form it takes, whether it's hard copy like paper or digital. But the principle is really the same. You need to protect it from, you want to guarantee, it's called the CIA triad. You want to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the information in all 3 states of processing, storage, and transmission. It's also important to realize that that's through the cyber life cycle of protect, detect, recover, and it's all aspects of technical controls, people, process, and organization. So basically, it's what the word says, information security. You're securing information. Some slice that down the lines of digital only, say it's informational all forms. A lot of that really depends on how your organization has allocated the responsibility for that.
Thanks, Alex. And Eduardo, would you please explain what an information security program would be and what types of businesses would require them?
Yeah, I like the definition that you have on screen. That when I work with clients and when I worked in corporations, I was the chief information security officer or chief security officer. I would always say information security programs are as good as they are in written, because if it is anybody that comes decides the rules of the day, when something happens, it's going to be difficult to find who's liable for what happened. And usually it's going to end up at the lowest point of the food chain. So it is a document, it's a set of guidelines, policies, procedures, in several levels, starting with the information security policy, overall policy, very simple, the major pillars for the organization. And in a nutshell, it's a way to keep the company protected ahead of the threats by designing controls, assessing risks, designing controls, and establishing ways of monitoring the compliance with those controls.
And Eduardo, how would you differentiate InfoSec, cybersecurity, and information assurance?
I like to go back to what Alex was saying, because we saw this evolution. So in the beginning, it was information security. Everything was on paper or digital, it didn't matter. You would call information security. So I had a case where there was a leakage, a data leakage, and we were investigating, and we were looking for a hacker, for a criminal, and actually the information that was leaking was on the desks. Everybody left at the end of the day, they would leave all the confidential information on the desks. So we really started working with the employees in sensitive areas to just lock the information into their drawers or lock their computer screens. And suddenly, in a few weeks, the data leakage went almost down to zero. Surely there were other problems, but the major problem is that the information was on paper or on screens, left alone after the workday. So it is, the information security is about really protecting information that is in the drawers, on the screens, on the whiteboards. The cybersecurity that Alex was mentioning is the new way of talking about the digital information that is that should be protected. And and when we talk about information assurance, is ensuring that the right people get the right information at the right time. It's like quality control or guarantee that everybody is going to get information they need. It is more about ensuring that information that is, no matter what is the medium that the information is resides on, it's going to be protected.
And now more than ever, information security programs are really important. Here are a few stats. 60% of global revenues are from digital sources, and more than 50% of corporate valuations are based on intangible assets. Eduardo, what would you say are the key elements of an effective information security program?
Both Alex and I mentioned a little bit earlier. It starts with a risk assessment, understanding the risks. This thing of saying, don't do this, don't do that, don't use AI, don't use, don't bring computers home, don't use the phone. It's going to stop innovation. It's worse than avoiding the risk is not knowing the risk. So it's first of all, a risk assessment is understanding the risks, then having the controls established in written, and then monitoring those controls through regular audits or regular tests or regular assessments. So we should have those parts, and then we will be fine.
Okay. And Alex, would you like to give us an overview of the regulatory framework that affects information security programs?
Yeah. How much time do you have? So the short answer is The regulatory frameworks depend on the jurisdiction. And what do I mean by that? In the United States, and the other thing is that you can think of it in three groups. You have the security obligations, you have the privacy obligations, and then you have sectoral obligations. So if you're in the automotive industry, you're subject to what happens or what's written specifically for automotive. If you're using credit cards, you're subject to PCI DSS, right? That's the last category. The first two categories are dependent on jurisdiction. So if you're in the United States, you're pretty much regulated by the NIST standards. And then when you're outside of the US, it's largely ISO, International Standards Organization. So it depends on jurisdiction. Then privacy is actually a little more complicated. It's complicated because in particularly in the US, globally there's between 150 and I think 180 countries that actually have privacy and data security regulations. In the US, we don't have one, kind of have three at the federal level hit different aspects. But in the US, privacy is run by the states. So that means there are 54 jurisdictions that can write a privacy regulation. And you're going to sit there and go, we only have 50 states. Good question, because DC, while it's not a state, it can write privacy regulations. And then we got the territories and properties and possessions like Puerto Rico that can write them. Right now, we only about 20 have. And then you also have data breach laws within each of those states. So it's really, really, really driven by whether you're dealing with security, privacy, or sectoral obligations, and then based on jurisdiction. And jurisdiction actually has two dimensions to it. The one is where you're physically housed. Yeah, what's your nexus? And then the other is where you are selling your goods and services, or you have, in short, where you have customers. So if you're based in the United States, but you have customers in Europe, you're subject to the European laws, just as an example. It's actually it can be rather complicated if you haven't been through it a few times, because once you've been through it, you kind of have the roadmap. So this is an area that I highly, highly recommend you don't try it on your own. Don't do this trick at home. You want to spend time with somebody to help at least net it out and help you navigate your obligations, and you can take it from there, but get that framework right at the top, or your life is going to be ugly probably in the next 12, 18 months.
And then, Alex, there's an
Can I
issue of, oh, go ahead.
can I add something to what Alex said? It's really what Alex said is really very important. And I'm not a lawyer, and I am really here partnering with lawyers a lot, because this is for someone that has experience and knows what he's doing. A lot of my colleagues in tech try to do this kind of thing of mapping frameworks by themselves, and they get in trouble, because this is for experts. I had a case where a client asked an intern to run a query through ChatGPT. They said, "Oh, we're going to do by ourselves." You can imagine the kind of hallucination came back, and then they spent energy and time. Unfortunately, they didn't get into any trouble, and I referred them to a couple of lawyers, and I'm sure they hired one of them, because this is the kind of thing that you should not try at home. This trick you should not try. I like this, Alex. I'm going to borrow it. Do not try this trick at home by yourself without the help of an expert, because it's overly complicated. When you think you know it, it changes. And only experience, only really the connection between tech and law can help you succeed.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. And just to kind of jump on that some more, because I think this is so important. Um, it you might think you're saving a little money on the front end or saving some energy, but you're really delaying your pain
Mhm.
because the further you go down the road without mapping out your obligations correctly, and that's the optimal word, correctly, because you may think you have, and then something comes at you out of left field, and you're like, oh my God, what happened? And then it's very painful, especially when you're dealing with regulators, pissed off customers, um, trusted third parties that are now questioning your sanity. It can get ugly. It can get ugly. Even spending a couple of hours, even one on the phone with who's been through it before is a huge, huge investment it'll return. It'll save you so many headaches. True.
And speaking of third parties, Alex, what are the best practices for managing third parties and supplier risks?
Okay. This is an area I end up spending a lot of time on, and it continues to grow. Um, Interestingly enough, for the past couple of years, the amount of attacks from the supply chain, cyber incidents caused by somebody in the supply chain, has doubled every year for 3 years in a row. And I would suspect when the numbers come out for 2025, they will have at least doubled, putting it at around 3 out of 5. We also know that in 2024, 1 out of 8 incidents, I think it was 1 out of every 8 cyber incidents was related to a third party. So we're seeing some big numbers. The number one issue that I see, and it's kind of crazy that it comes up all the time. Organizations will try to do their third party risk management using a brute force approach, which is kind of insane when you look at the average small and medium sized business. So basically under $1 billion or under 1,000 people, they have about 1,000 vendors that they deal with. Large institutions that I deal with, it's not unusual for them to have 3, 4, 5,000. And if you have a team of, say, 3 people dedicated to third-party risk management, you can do the math. You can guess how many years it's going to take you to get through that bunch the first time. So brute force doesn't work. Get yourself a tool to help you track, then parse out your the third parties you're with into, say, 4 categories. You can stack rank them basically on how strategic they are to you and how much damage they can do. And what do I mean by damage? Most common forms of damage that's done, just like we've seen with like Change Healthcare and what's going on with Jaguar, is availability. They're not available. They're a single point of failure, kind of like, we had a brief outage with Amazon that lasted a few hours, and then Microsoft, I guess, felt lonely, so they had their own outage. And we saw all sorts of strange impacts in organizations. So, number one, if something happens with third parties, how's it going to hurt you? What's the damage going to do? The other part of that is what happens if they breach your data. This is especially important in privacy because in the privacy world, you have to have agreements. You're responsible for um, anybody you transferred protected information to. So categorized by risk using the strategic value and then also how much they can hurt you. And I recommend usually doing that in 4 categories. All the way at the bottom are the folks like, if we get to them, that's fine. At the top, most critical, and then you can divide the next into moderate and medium risk, however you want to do it. But the idea is to then parse those out into categories. I also highly recommend that you use a tool designed for third-party risk management. Excuse me. Many of them already have um, different types of assessment feeds. there's companies out there that help you assess and monitor third parties. Um, we're really not talking about products and tools. Anybody reaches out afterwards, I'm sure we can help you. But there's some excellent tools out there. So get a GRC tool, particularly one that has these feeds in there that can help you. And then lastly, if they are a provider of a digital service, kind of like a cloud, an MSP, an MSSP, an ISP, lots of acronyms I know, use the SOC 2 Type 2 report. That is a third-party assessment. It's actually called a third-party attestation. So a third party has already done the assessment for you, and read the report from the back to the front. The back of the report tells you how well they did and what security services they provide. Right? So that's great. And by the way, you want a SOC 2 Type 2. The Type 2 is especially important because it means the controls have been in place for at least 6 months. So you have some history. Then lastly, be sure that you have all the terms, conditions, and the agreements are memorialized properly in your agreement. So, give you an example. If you are relying on a third party and they're doing a lot of processing and they contain your data, if there's an incident, you're going to need their cooperation. Get that in the agreement. Also in the agreement have terms along the lines of, if we get subpoenaed, you're going to give us the information we need. If we're investigating a fraud case, and we request log files, you will give us our log files, right? Those are some of the basic terms. And again, this is something you'd have to sit down and talk to with practitioners like Eduardo and myself, and your attorneys. But these are the kinds of things you want to think about. Keep in mind that third party is now where we're seeing the fastest growing percentage of incidents.
Thanks, Alex. Eduardo, you mentioned the use of ChatGPT. A lot of employees now are using ChatGPT and AI tools. So how are you advising companies?
Well, I go along, and I like the slide that you have on the screen, that where we were talking about the information security programs, and the need of having policies, procedures, risks, the way we monitor risks, how we audit, but also considering all the parts that you have here. It's not only about the information; it's where the information resides, who runs the informations, and the third parties, and so on. In the case of AI, we are living, if you are a little older than the Generation Z, you might remember internet adoption, cloud computing adoption. It's a new technology, it's a new wave that we have. And if we, in information security, in cybersecurity, we keep saying no, we become the department of no. And actually should say yes, and here are the risks. Here how I can help you assess the risks. So AI is just another technology that we have to acknowledge it's useful. It can be a differentiator in several sectors, but it needs to be assessed. We need to understand the controls that we need to put in place. A classical case that happened a couple of years ago is that Samsung engineers were testing their code for very sensitive technology using ChatGPT when the first versions. And then when Samsung discovered it, it just prohibited everybody to use. So it went from 100% people using to 0%. So we should be in the middle and say, it's about raising awareness of the users and teaching them that they can be the first barrier to protect their jobs against criminals. Because if the company goes down, everybody goes down together and they would lose their jobs. So everybody wants to play a role, but you need to teach them the basics. You need to raise awareness and show that AI can be really helpful, but if not properly used, it can become just a conduit for criminals and for data leakage.
Thanks,
I really
Eduardo.
like the way Eduardo marched through that. That's very important. The awareness and training is incredibly important. Uh, Probably more important than that, to your point, is the alignment with the business and enabling the business. You know, by aligning with the business and working with them, if they have a strategy that they're putting forward, you can sit there and say, hey, you know what? Here's a better way of doing it. It's more secure, it's less risky for you. Or at the same time, if they're being too conservative, you can advise them and say, you know what, you can take a little more risk there, right? So instead of being the ones, no,
Mm.
Exactly.
that you've now helped enable the business. I think that's incredibly important, and that also plays into the awareness area uh, because let's face it, these non-technical folks especially, they look at this stuff like it's magic, right? It's that simple. They just look at it as magic. They don't know the limitations. They don't know how it works. And I think us as cyber and technology professionals, to Eduardo's point, we're kind of obligated to help them out that way. And
Mhm.
at the same time, I would expect them to help us understand the business, their business, what they live with every day.
Now, I like that point that you are making, Alex, about end user awareness, and I just wanted to add that I hear a lot from the my tech colleagues that the human factor, the human link, is the weakest link. But actually, I like to counter and say that they can be the best link
Oh,
if
absolutely.
well prepared and aware. Because nobody wants to play a fool in front of a criminal, right? And to become the famous person that allowed the criminals to breach the network. So you want to make them feel that they are part of the game. They're protecting the
Absolutely.
corporation, the organization, so they can protect their jobs. Because look at so many cases you mentioned here that
Yeah.
where the companies lost so much money, and down the road there was impact and even layoffs.
Think about that as phishing is the perfect example, right? Almost all ransomware happens because somebody did something silly, usually clicking a link. And humans are not going to stop clicking links anytime soon because we encourage it, we teach them to, right? It's just the nature of the beast. Um, but in that case, we often think about, oh, look at that person for clicking the link, right? Well, how about all the people that don't click the link because they've been given awareness training, right? They For not clicking or not doing something silly or even asking their colleague, is there something strange here? They've actually prevented an incident. We only talk about when it fails. All right.
Exactly.
So if we get it right 95% of the time and 5% of the time somebody does something they shouldn't have, I don't know about you. I think 95% is still an A, right? We can always be better.
Yes.
But what would have been like without that awareness? And it was two-thirds of the time they clicked on the link, right? That would be hell. Good
Agree.
point.
And Eduardo, how can businesses practically integrate their information security programs into their overall governance, risk, and compliance programs?
So I recommend to the audience that use this one slide, very well built. That's simple, but it summarizes the way we can. If you Let's step back a little bit and use an analogy. If you're building a house, you're going to have the wiring in the house before you paint it and before you have all the walls ready. It's the same thing as with security, with information security, cybersecurity. You need to add the controls as you build the governance. If the governance is there already, and most of the time it's an evolution, right? You are not going to just to add stuff after the house is ready. You're going to have to break walls, and it's going to be a mess. So the way of integrating is trying to have all the risk assessments, all the controls integrated within the existing governance model. the governance framework. Once I told, when I was a chief security officer, I told my team that we had to add in our security committee. We had a security committee. We had to add HR, human resources, and we had to add marketing because we were launching a lot of products, and we were a brand new company, a large telecom company, but we were 3 years old, and some of them told me, what marketing has to do with cybersecurity? They're all crazy. I said, yeah, but it's part of their job description, being crazy. It's our job to teach them to be crazy, but aware of the controls. So it's better if they are with us and we know what they are doing than just discovering after the products are launched. HR, why it's important HR to be here? They're not techie people, but they know what's going on in terms of motivating employees, where we have tension, where we have potential risks involving personnel. So we need to get them on board. They need to be part of the committee. So the way we integrate this is having these lines of defense that you have on the screen. I like that usually we talk about 3 lines of defense. Here we have a 4th line of defense, that is who has the money, right? Is the board, the external advisor. This is very important. The 3rd line of defense is audit. It's after everything is done, we need to keep monitoring with an independent view. And usually information security doesn't like to work with audit because they feel they are competing. They are not. I had great partners in audit in several organizations I worked with. The 2nd line of defense is the leadership. So it's the managers, the people that are managing teams, that designing strategy. We need to teach them risk management, work with compliance, work with the finance controls, the awareness. And the 1st line of defense are people that we're talking about. The end user that are usually is said to be the stupid person or the person that doesn't know anything. And actually they are the best partners when they understand that you are trying to help them get their job done and protect their jobs if the company goes down because of a data breach. They are the best partners. But we need to make an effort to go to them because they will many times feel uncomfortable to coming to us because especially in cybersecurity, we think that we are close to God, right? That we know everything. And we need to work together. That's the way we integrate information security and cybersecurity into the existing business controls.
Yeah. Eduardo, I'm loving your analogies. I love the home analogy. That's very true. And one of the things that came to mind is when you build a house, you have inspections, but then when you buy a house, you also have inspections. And you're looking for them to give you a sense of, you want an objective understanding and assessment of the house. Out of that, you probably want to know your weaknesses more than your strengths because you want them fixed before you buy the house.
Exactly.
So I think that's excellent. One thing I'll bring up is here it talks about the 4 lines of defense, and you were mentioning 3 lines of defense. For those playing at home, there is a model called the 3 lines of defense. It's often written as number 3, LOD, and it's put out by IIA. It's a standard governance model that you find in organizations with mature governance practices. Usually, well, large financial institutions are mandated by law to do it, so you usually find it there and other places. If you look at that model, you got the 3 lines and kind of tucked on the side, and kind of a horizontal, a vertical bar is the external audit, which is often referred to as the 4th line, right? So just as a frame of reference for what Eduardo was talking about, it's an excellent point. It's incredibly relevant. Just wanted to clarify it.
And Alex, this is as you touch this. This is the way to move the organization from
Yep.
firefighting to
Yep.
addressing risk from a strategic perspective. And
And being
today,
proactive instead of
yeah, and today it's a problem for us in tech because if we love tech and don't want to talk to the boards now want to talk to us. And many CISOs, many chief information officers, are not prepared to have this communication. They want to talk about bits and bytes,
oh
encryption
God.
keys, and this is not going to fly. We need to either bring someone like Alex, that is an expert that is able to manage the conversation,
Thank you.
or prepare ourselves to acquire those skills, the communication skills, collaboration skills, to talk about the business impact of information security, not only the technical aspects of information security.
Yeah, and thank you for the compliment. I appreciate that, Eduardo, and I would say the same for you. You know, you can also have that kind of conversation, but it's incredibly important. As you know, one of the first slides talked about how most income revenue, excuse me, globally comes from digital. Most assets that are driving corporate valuations are non-tangible, basically digital data, human capital, right? And as we move down that road, those of us that are protected, that are charged with protecting that, are going to be pulled into board and business conversations, whether we like it or not. And if we don't have the conversation, the senior leadership and boards are going to go to external third parties to have that conversation because they need the information to make informed decisions. They have an obligation to do that. And if they can't get it internally, they're going to go outside, which is, it's not, it's clearly not the best, but it's far better than living in a vacuum.
Exactly.
Alex, what is the NIST framework?
Okay, then this is the NIST cybersecurity framework, often referred to as CSF. Version 2 is the current version. It was released, I think it's about 18 months ago now. It's basically a framework. It's, well, basically a framework. It is a framework. The word framework's in the title. It's really designed to help organizations map their journey. So it breaks it into the different stages, and you could see them there. It breaks it into five. Those of you who are used to international, we usually talk about protect, detect, recover as the three basic phases. Within NIST, they break protect into two. They put recover into two. And in the latest version, they've added a governance model, a, excuse me, a governance function that goes across all the stages. It's actually designed with four basic phases in it that, like Eduardo was saying, you go from being brute force reactionary, kind of playing whack-a-mole, to you evolve into being very predictive and strategic. You tend to get out in front of things more often. Now, all of us know that nobody likes living in the whack-a-mole reactive mode for very long, and none of us are ever as proactive and forward-thinking as we would like to be. So the reality is the last phase is really aspirational, and it's by design. So what you can do, and I won't go through all the mechanics within each of those phases and each of those stages, is a set of, call them attributes, what an organization would look like in this mode. So it helps you map your journey. A very important part of this is because it's a framework, think of it as a vessel, right? So it's not prescriptive. Supporting this, what you really want is a more prescriptive standard that you have tailored and augmented for your own. So, for example, in the United States, a private corporation, the document you would look to is NIST 800-171, preferably the latest release, which is R3, revision 3. And that lists control objectives, and assessment objectives that helps you map out each of those phases. And what you should do with that is say, okay, compliance is table stakes. That's the minimum. So then you take a risk-based approach, looking at your business, looking at your threat environment, a few other, the business aspects, what people are concerned about, and you augment that. So you build upon that to protect your business. Because at the end of the day, our jobs are not to check boxes for compliance. Our jobs are to protect the business, which includes everybody's job. And the NIST CSF is a great vessel to help you organize your work and map out your journey.
Can I add something, Alex?
Please.
I love the way you put it together, and I explained it a very complex topic in a way that we can well can understand. One thing that I'd say is even outside the U.S., I'm speaking from Madrid, and even outside the U.S., NIST has been adopted as a gold standard.
Yep.
Because it first it evolves. So like you said, it's R3 now. So it is always adding new aspects that are to address what we have, and we're going to talk a little bit about AI soon. But it is really something. If I had to recommend that anyone willing to learn a little bit more about this topic, cybersecurity, information security, I would say spend some time here, because the U.S. government did a great job here in making it more palatable for not only technical people, but also non-technical people. There's a lot of participation from society, from the business side. It's really good. So I highly recommend knowing a little bit more about it.
Thanks, Eduardo. Moving on to access and control. Eduardo, how do you think organizations should think about classifying data and controlling access?
Well, Alex was talking about this earlier. We either don't do anything and discover how bad was that down the road when there's a data breach, and we don't know which information leaked, what is the impact, or we do too much. And I worked with an organization that had 7 layers of data in a data classification model. So that was public and available, public, internal, public. It was a mess. And what Alex was saying is simplify it. 4 layers, 5, 3 layers if it's too complicated for your organization, for the size of organization. But really understand we can stop your business if something happens. That's the most important part of the information. This is the critical. There's several names you can give to it. Business critical. If you are a government organization, might be top secret, or and down to public. This information, if it's a school, an university, the grades of the students will be internal information that should not be shared for privacy, because of privacy issues. But if we talk about the programs, if we talk about what is the syllabus of the course, this can be public. There's no problem. But in between, we will have information that HR information, we will have information that is related to the internal processes, procedures. So I would go and follow what Alex said about having the four layers. It'd be enough for most of the organizations. Having something that is really doesn't matter if it's public, up to the one that if something happens, and if the competition knows, the competitors know about the information, it's going to change the way we do business. It happened once with the clients. We were doing an audit. I was working for an audit company, a big one of the big 4 audit companies, and going down in the elevator, someone was celebrating that they were launching. It was a Friday. They were launching on Monday. After 4 months working, they were launching a new line of products. And there was someone in the elevator that was married to a competitor. and they told them, the family member, over the weekend, the competition was working on the same line of products, and they launched imperfect, but they announced it on Sunday night. So, and that information should not be being discussed in the elevator going to lunch, right, on a Friday. So this is the kind of thing, but that person that was doing this was not aware, was not prepared, was not trained. There was no clear data classification scheme, and the information caused a major problem to the company. Anything to add, Alex?
Alex, yeah.
The only thing I was going to say, I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of meat in what you said, and the line here about the restrictions on senior and junior employees can be different, not only because of maturity and experience, but also the criticality of the information they share, that they have access to, right? So that you want to keep in mind. I'm going to step on my soapbox just for a minute. In my experience, if you don't get your identity and access controls right, going back to the house analogy, you're building your house on shifting sand. It's not a solid foundation, right? So it's the difference between building the Empire State Building and ending up with the Leaning Tower of Pisa, which was built on an unsettled foundation.
Yeah, and I agree with you. In tech, we say that identity today is the most important critical thing that you have to think upfront, because everybody works remotely, hybrid environments, and third parties, like you were mentioning, and we mentioned down the road Colonial and others, and we don't know who's inside, who's outside, and employees that were let go 4 months ago are still with having access. Third parties that should not have access to the information the senior management has are having access because they were doing a test and somebody forgot to take their access away. So this kind of thing really can be complicated.
Yes, it can be.
Alex, could you just explain the importance of data minimization?
Yeah. Yeah. In a simple sentence, you can't get in trouble for data you never collected. Okay. So what does that mean? What does that mean? The moment you collect information, data, whatever the nature is, you have an obligation to protect it. Encrypting data, protecting data in all three forms, storage, processing, transmission, it costs money. It costs time. It costs energy. It diverts resources. It's not cheap. It's not free. And then you also have to retain it depending on obligations. The typical retention is useful life plus 7 years. So a bank statement is 1 month plus 7 years, because when the next statement comes out, the old one is less relevant. You have to retain it for 7 years. All this costs time and money. When you're dealing with a 30-year mortgage, you're going to have that data for 30 years plus 37 years. Those are just examples. There's actually times that are longer than 7, and there's ones that are much shorter than 7. So the less data you have, you can't get in trouble for something you don't collect. The less cost, time, energy you have from, the less data you have, the more efficient and more effective you are. And then I guess the point that I need to bring up is in the world of AI, because AI is driven by data, right? You get into trouble because of the nature of the data that trained the model, what you're putting in, what you're getting out. That's the trouble spot, right? That's where most of your headaches, not all, but that's where most of your headaches are going to come from. So there is a tendency, because it drives the data drives the value, and also is your trouble spot, the risk you have to manage. There is a tendency of people over collecting data in the hopes that they will find some magical insight at a later date. I would encourage you to avoid that to the greatest extent possible. And this is where you this is a prime area for collaborating with the business, because the business folks are going to want to over collect. That's their tendency. People in IT don't like to over collect because it's more headaches for them. And yeah, why do we need this stuff, right? We don't need it. But business people like marketing on the other end are always looking to over collect. This is a perfect opportunity to educate the business on the ramifications, the headaches, the costs, um, how they can get in trouble, um, and then work together and collaborate and determine what to do about it. It's also a good time to speak with the legal folks about, hey, if we collect this kind of data, what are our obligations around it, right? Is this considered to be sensitive information that is subject to privacy laws? Is it subject to data breach laws? Is it controlled in one jurisdiction but not another? Right? So you get to find these things out, especially, like one of the most confusing places right now when it comes to data is about minors. What's a minor? Sounds kind of simple. Is a minor 21? Or the 16 or 13? It- those are all numbers that you see nationally and internationally about what's considered a minor. And then who has the authority to make the decision for that minor? So, depending on what you're collecting and how you're doing it, you can run into some headaches. So, partner with the business, work with legal. Remember, you can't get in trouble for data you never collected. Yeah. We all get in trouble for data that we absolutely have to have for our business. I don't know an organization that hasn't had an issue. If they haven't had an issue, it means they haven't been around very long.
Agree.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Eduardo, how does physical security of assets come into play with an information security program?
Here we have a major disconnection between because if it is we are talk about guards and physical barriers and controls for parking or access control to receptions, and it's completely isolated from cybersecurity or from information security. And that's a big mistake, because if someone can walk through the door and unplug your computer or take away your asset, then you are in trouble, right? And everything that you design to protect the information in the digital world is going to go. So we need to work together. And I was once the corporate security director, so I had information security and physical security in my department. So we had, it took a while, but we put them to work together, because look at what happened to Colonial Pipelines, for example, a case where the attack came through the digital world but affected the physical world. So it is we need to, and could go the other way around. So we need to understand if that the physical security today relies on access control systems, cameras, doors, sensors that are all being operated digitally. So we need to have our third parties that work in physical security really under contracts, like Alex was mentioning, and trained and participating in the end user awareness campaigns, going through those monitoring assessments, audits, like we do with our internal teams, and we should work together, because otherwise we are causing a problem to each other. We are on the same team. We're not competing. There was a time when even who was called the chief security officer was a problem in the corporation. The chief security officer is the physical security officer, and the other one is the security officer. Was really, and today the professional associations, especially the ones that are based in the U.S. but have members across the globe, like ACE, American Society for Industrial Security, ISACA, IIA for audit, they are all collaborating in standards, in procedures, in training, because we are all on the same boat. If the whole is on your side, we are going down. we are going to drown together. So we need to collaborate, because physical security and cybersecurity can function together and really protect the company, or we can cause damage to the company together.
Alex, would you like to add to that?
I think Eduardo did a great job. The only thing I think we need to highlight is that the way the world has gone is a lot of things that happen in the digital world can have a real world impact in the physical world. Colonial Pipeline is an excellent example. If we look at the attacks and disruptions of like water supplies in municipalities, we've had foreign nations get into our telecommunication systems. These are real world things, right? And think about a ransomware attack by a nation state where they won't give you the key back to decrypt your data. You know, Colonial Pipeline paid a bit of a ransom, they got the key, but to decrypt the data. But what if the nation state never wanted to give you that key? Right?
Yes.
People can die. People can die.
Yeah. Eduardo, if my company has limited resources, you said not to rely on ChatGPT. What should my focus be in terms of security?
Well, if you are a part of the audience here, watching this live or recorded, it's a first step. The first step is to be aware of the risks, understand what are the threats, what you can do. Depending on your budget, talk to a professional association, participate. If you are part of a trade association, everybody's trying to learn more about this. If you can talk to a professional like Alex, for example, talk to a professional. It might cost much less than you are thinking, because if something happens, it's going to be much more expensive. The damage to your company's reputation, to your own reputation, will be much higher than you think. And so it's really not about having fear or feeling not up to the task. It is really understanding the risks, because nobody knows better about your business than yourself. But let someone that knows about the risks to help you figure out what are the right measures for your business.
Thanks, Eduardo. And Alex, any closing remarks on that point?
No, I think Eduardo did an excellent job. I'll highlight one incredibly important point. The cost of an incident far outpaces what it would have cost to prevent. And that number is only going up when you incorporate the long tails on what's happening. So, for example, the famous Target breach of 2013, that was actually because a malicious actor came through a third party, actually the people that manage the heating and ventilation systems for Target. That happened in 2013. The last lawsuit was settled in 2024. It went on for 11 years, right? So the cost of preventing that, and I've been in this business a long time. I have never seen the cost of prevention exceed the cost of an incident.
True.
So something to keep in mind. The challenge is to figure out what's your priority, right?
Exactly.
Some things provide you greater impact and are more likely than others. And that is the challenge. But the idea of saying, no, I'm not going to spend $50,000 on that. I'll just wait for an incident and spend 20 million, right? That's bad logic.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Good point.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Eduardo. That concludes the session. Thank you to your viewers and our sponsors. I hope you join us for the next session.
Thank you. A pleasure.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Thanks.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Eduardo.